Okay, we're at 2 minutes after the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We'll run through introductions first. I'm Daryl Riley, Senior Manager at Templar Shield, running all things managed services, specializing in third-party and vendor risk. What we have here also is Jean-Don Bullockbus, Black Kite founder, Mitch Blackburn, ServiceNow, and then Jason Dill, who is co-hosting and will run through the Black Kite ServiceNow integration. And Jean-Don will do a deeper dive into Black Kite. This is geared towards utilities and energy. And what we're hearing in the energy and utility space is providers are doing some layoffs and realignments and having to manage more and more risk and new risk with less resources, and are kind of looking for a way to automate and or outsource these third-party risk assessments due to the current macroeconomic climate. And we'll address this today. So without that, Jean-Don, would you like to introduce yourself and then hand off to Mitch? And Mitch, you can hand off to Jason Dill.
Thanks, Daryl. Yes, this is Jean-Don. I'm CTO and co-founder of Black Kite. Previously working for NATO Counter Cyberterrorist Task Force. And what we are doing for Black Kite now, we were doing for NATO. So we were doing some kind of like a drill test for government agencies. As you know, government agencies, especially the sensitive ones, you can find a vulnerable server on their DMZ. Instead, you can find vulnerable vendor or supplier. That was what we were testing out during the Counter Cyberterrorist Task Force mission. I spent 4 years, and then after the service, resigned from NATO, and I couldn't help myself to find a scalable way to do that. And we created this idea and presented to State of Virginia's incubator program called MAC37. And they have incubated us, and then Google supported us for cloud infrastructure, and then VC, and then hundreds of customers, and the rest is history. So that is who am I and how Black Kite came here. Mitch?
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I joined ServiceNow about 7 years ago or 6 years ago, and over the last few years, I've been really focusing in on the energy and utility industry, and more recently focusing on our product strategy specific to the industry. Prior to that, spent many years in consulting with a lot of, a lot of energy, oil and gas customers, and 8 years at one of the large US utilities here in Florida, where I'm based. So glad to be part of the discussion and looking forward to the collaboration.
Thanks, Mitch.
I'll pass it to Jason.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Dill. I'm a manager with Templar Shield. I've been with the firm for about 6 years now. I am a TPRM specialist. I have been on both sides of the table. I've been on the one side of the table doing actual vendor risk assessments and vendor selections. I've been on the consulting end of things, doing implementations as well. And I will be leading the demo today, showing you how we integrate ServiceNow's vendor risk management module with Black Kite's AI, machine learning, security ratings, and compliance ratings capabilities in the platform. So that's what I'll be showing you today. Daryl?
Jason, take it away.
All right. Thank you, sir. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just a quick sanity tech check. Daryl and team, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
And then can you hear me okay? I'm sharing video. Just want to make sure my audio is coming through as well.
Yeah, you're 5x5.
Perfect. Okay. So to start off, what we're doing is we're bringing in a series of security ratings for vendors that are in scope for the client that has vendor risk deployed with their ServiceNow solution. So in this case, we have what's called a spoke. It's in the integration hub. It's a spoke that's currently being certified through ServiceNow. And we bring in the security ratings. Now notice at the top, I have my vendors in scope. Now I have 17 vendors here. This is because you may have 400 or 500, 600 vendors or thousands of vendors, but maybe only a select few you want to send over to get your Black Kite security ratings. So in this case, we have our list in number of vendors in scope for Black Kite continuous monitoring. Now down here, Black Kite leverages the FAIR methodology, which you'll get to see the behind the scenes of that later on today. But we get to see our average financial impact that Black Kite has determined based off of these 17 vendors in scope and the sum of our financial impact as well. We're also pulling in the average ransomware susceptibility index across all the vendors, the average data breach index across all our vendors, these 17, and then the cybersecurity ratings distribution. So what are our vendors that are rated as an A minus, A, B minus, B plus, B, and a C, and how many of our vendors fit in this rating category. Then down here, we have our list of vendors in my environment like PayPal, Fiserv, FedEx, Deluxe Business Systems, etc. Now, all of these vendors have these ratings provided by Black Kite, like the cyber rating, safeguard rating, reputation rating, resiliency rating, and privacy ratings. So this, you get a holistic view of your vendor portfolio and those cyber ratings. Now let's drill into an actual company record like Fiserv to see what these ratings that we pulled in from Black Kite actually look like associated to this vendor. So I'm going to start off for anybody who's familiar with ServiceNow, you have what's called the core company record. Now, the core company record, this is the record where you store your website, the industry, the status of your vendor, whether it's in evaluation or you're actively monitoring it or onboarding that vendor or whatnot. ServiceNow's platform also gives the ability to rank tier, like strategic partner, tactical supplier, excluded supplier, etc. And then a vendor tier as well. This is kind of like the inherent risk performed by your internal business users. That's your vendor tier. And then, of course, you could identify your stakeholders, like your vendor manager, your business owners, and then build in a hierarchy of parent-child for the vendor as well. Now, as I scroll down here, you'll see this company name, Fiserv Inc. in Black Kite, is pulling across the cyber rating of C with a data breach index of 0.439 and ransomware index of 0.401. How do we calculate this? Well, it's based on the average of the technical cyber rating, like safeguard, privacy, resiliency, and reputation. Now, how did Black Kite pull these data? Well, these ratings, we scroll down, we actually see the data elements and when they were last updated. And then the safeguard has a series of subcategories as well, like patch management score of 48, which is an F, application security of 58, website security of 79, and CDN security of 89. So these scores roll up to your ratings for safeguard, and the same thing with privacy, your SSL, TLS strength, credential management, etc. Resiliency and reputation have subcategories as well. So what we're doing with our integration, it's a two-way integration. We're bringing in all these security ratings from Black Kite and tying them to your core company record so you can see those ratings as they are identified by Black Kite. Now, I mentioned financial impact previously. Financial impact is to calculate the cost of your data breaches. Now, Black Kite, which you'll see in the behind the scenes with Jandan, you'll get to see how they could leverage the FAIR methodology to calculate probable financial impact. Now, Black Kite has what's called industry standard values. But if you could leverage those industry standard values and pull in that financial impact, but if you know what your unit cost and the number of records you have that you're sharing with the vendor, you could actually personalize that and still leverage the FAIR methodology. So the number of PII records that you're sharing, maybe it's 1,000. And maybe you know the unit cost of your PII records, 500. And the same thing with your non-PII, maybe you have 250 and those are only valued at $45. And then you could calculate whether you have internal, if that vendor is going to have internal access or not. Now, ultimately, these dollar amounts, or I'm sorry, these dollar amounts and these quantities are going to be sent over to Black Kite, and your probable financial impact will then update. And again, back to your dashboards, your average financial impact and the sum of financial impact will also update as well once you you identify that you want to leverage your own values and not the industry standards. So that is spoke one for that we have integrating with Black Kite and ServiceNow to pull in the security ratings and the financial impact. Mitch, you have any questions or any comments on that?
No, I think, we'll talk about it a little more. This is a great example of, there's a lot of great sources for data out there, and there's a lot of great services to provide those, but being able to smash those together or link those with the data records you have and put them in one view for this situation that Daryl was talking about. Fewer people trying to do more stuff with more risk. It just makes it more realistic that they're going to be able to protect the company by having this, if you will, kind of all in one place. But we'll talk about it a little more as we talk about the rest of the story.
Excellent. As I mentioned before, we have 2 spokes that are going to be available in the ServiceNow store. Both those spokes can be their plug and play, download and link up your Black Kite records to ServiceNow, plug and play. So what I just showed was the security ratings with financial impact. The next one that I'm going to show you is compliance. Now you could download one or both of these from the ServiceNow store. They will be available probably next month for download. They're currently being certified for Utah. But I'm going to switch over to the compliance ratings views, and we're going to talk a little bit about holistically, how does ServiceNow do vendor risk in general? How do you perform a vendor risk assessment? Well, what you want to do is you want to you could create an engagement, or you could create a vendor risk assessment and submit it out to the vendor. Now, for those of you that have not seen the vendor risk assessment module in ServiceNow, it's very powerful. You could leverage a SIG questionnaire or a homegrown questionnaire to send out to your vendors. And then you could also include document requests. So in this case, I want to send out a vendor risk assessment to Fiserv, and I want to send out a sample questionnaire, and I want to send out a SOC 1 request and a SOC 2 request. Now, at this point, without the Black Kite integration, I'm going to have to come in here as a vendor risk analyst, and I'm going to have to open up this SOC 1 request and manually review it and manually read it and identify what are the controls in place that this vendor has for due diligence. I'm going to have to review that document manually. And that could be quite an undertaking, reviewing a SOC 1 or a SOC 2, an InfoSec policy, the PCI attestation of compliance. Any documents that you retrieve from your vendors will be in a document request. And you would have to manually review those. And for those of you that haven't seen what the vendor portal looks like in the platform, I'm going to take off my vendor risk analyst hat on and show you what the vendor actually sees. The vendor gets this access to this portal where they could view their assessments, issues, and tasks. The vendor can even manage their own team. So they could add contacts such as like a compliance manager. They could add their own contacts. So it takes you away from managing your vendor's contacts. So this is a very powerful platform, and a powerful aspect of the platform is the vendor portal. Now the vendor can review this questionnaire, this questionnaire that's provided to them, and answer questions in the questionnaire, and even answer SOC questions like, do you have a SOC 1 report? If yes, attach it. So we're taking the vendor and you out of email and putting them into a portal for them to answer their questionnaires, their SIGs, and providing documents. We're even giving them the capability to manage issues and tasks as well. You could assign a task out to the vendor, and they'll be able to respond in the vendor portal. But what happens once they submit this document request for the SOC 1 and the SOC 2? What happens? Well, it comes back and you would normally have to review that manually, like I showed you a moment ago. Click on review responses and open this attachment and review it. But what we built is a two-way integration, and this is our compliance scope. We build the two-way integration to forward these documents over to the Black Kite instance. So Black Kite can use their unique parser, scan that document, and then ultimately what they'll do is determine compliance, completeness, and confidence for 14 different frameworks. Now, some of these frameworks may be familiar to you all, like NIST 853, PCI DSS, HIPAA, COBIT, ISO 27001, etc. These are the 14 frameworks that Black Kite is going to scan all those documents, map those controls, and see how compliant that vendor is with these documents. With these regulations. And then they're going to identify the score, the completeness, and confidence. Now, if you see a short on the completeness score, you may want to follow up with this vendor and ask them for an InfoSec policy and how they determine compliance with NIST 853. So you could actually leverage these reports and dig in further with your vendor and ask for new documentation, which Black Kite will then scan as well. And ultimately, these compliance scores should all update in real time once Black Kite does its magic. That being said, Mitch, if you don't have any questions, I'm ready to turn this over to Jandan so he could pull back the curtains and get us behind the scenes and under the hood.
Well, let's pull back the curtains for a bit, but I definitely have a couple of comments and questions that I want to follow up on as we come out to the close.
Excellent. All right, Jandan, you're up. Thank you, sir.
Righty. Okay, let me share my screen and then get going. Righty. So the Black Kite is a cyber risk intelligence platform built mostly for from an offensive purpose from perspective. So what we're providing is we are illuminating the supply chain, right? You know, previously when we have a product, we were putting that inside our firewall. So we were running a vulnerable scan on that. And if we found a vulnerability, we were patching that. So that was the kind of the pre-cloud stuff, right? When we have the floating floors. But after the cloud transformation and the SaaS transformation, we are outsourcing everything. Like ServiceNow is another supplier, and we have Salesforce or we have Slack or whatever that. Of course, infrastructure is also running on cloud. So that many provider now is actually serving us, but the traditional tools are not allowed to use that. You cannot just simply launch a Nessus scanner against Salesforce, right? So what happens is that a platform like us has to do this non-intrusively and collect that intelligence and eliminate the vulnerability weaknesses coming from those vendors and suppliers. That's what Black Kite does. And we do that from 3 different angles, which we're going to see that in the platform in a minute. So we eliminate the risk from technical cyber point of view and also map that to the compliance requirements. Finally, quantify the risk in business terms. So if you're going to communicate with the upper level managers, so you'll be able to use the language that they are already familiar with. Some of the other sub indices that we're going to be also talking about, so like ransomware susceptibility index, to just kind of see that how similar an organization to the other organization previously experienced ransomware. So with that, let's see that in action, right? So let's start with the big picture first. When you are talking about Black Kite, obviously this dashboard is not what you are going to use. This is just the illumination of the data. So Black Kite is a collection of vendor nodes in a graph database. So we have all vendors and who has relation with which one of those companies. We can discover them automatically. We can even tell you that who is doing business with another organization. If you are asking us that, hey, tell me about this organization, we will be able to tell you that, hey, this company alone is not a single company. It's actually a collection of multiple companies, subsidiaries, and also, of course, the vendors of that. So a company definition in our system is something like this. Of course, you can go a little bit even higher up in the chain, like third parties, fourth parties, and end parties. You'll be able to see that each one of those upstream and downstream. So that is Black Kite is actually building a database of relations between each customer and vendors and build that from a non-intrusive open source data collection point of view. There's a big architecture going on behind the scene. I'm not going to go through each one of those things, but in order to generate the assessment that we are doing, as a user, the only thing that you're going to need is the company domain. When you provide that to us, we will be able to process it and find out everything belongs to that company, and we will be able to extract a lot of information for that non-intrusively. So sometimes people are getting confused that, oh, okay, is this a like a Nessus scanner? No, we're not. So we are actually finding all these things non-intrusively. The target company doesn't know we're actually collecting data for them. So that is the beauty of that. And as you can see in the company overview, you can see the 3D dashboard that Jason mentioned in the Templar Shield ServiceNow integration. You can see those 3D view of this example organization, along with some of the tags, like if this company has been affected by some of the high-profile events like Russia-Ukraine conflict, or recently the 3CX, the phone management system, got hacked. We can also identify if an organization is affected by upstream or downstream suppliers. Remember that again, since we already have the vendor relation of each organization, we can identify those kind of attacks. Similarly, we can identify if your suppliers are susceptible to Log4j or any other like high-profile events like Microsoft Exchange or whatever the recent one is. We can identify those things and provide you that intelligence in these tags. Down here, we have the 3 dials that provides the risk from multiple point of view. This technical cyber rating is what we see objectively from the outside point of view. On the right-hand side, this is what the company says in their documents. As you may imagine, they may not always aligning, right? So on paper, a lot of organizations are doing great, but in reality, there might be some challenges. So don't expect those 2 things are actually aligning, because they're not. And finally, we're getting the opinion of yourself, right? Because no matter what, the vendor is actually, secure or insecure. Eventually, the risk is coming from your exposures to that vendor. The less exposure, of course, less risk. So that probable financial impact is going to be providing your point of view to that risk. So if we were drilling down into technical rating, which is also given here, again, the starting point is going to be our digital footprint. So digital footprint is an output of the initial domain. Let's say in this case, example.com. We can identify other domains that this organization has, or all the IP addresses, even the IP blocks assigned to this organization, subdomains, and we do this continuously. If tomorrow there's some of the IP addresses change and they don't use this, we will be able to detect that and we will be able to update our records. We can also identify where this company's assets are located in the geographical location. So you'll be able to identify if there is anything in like Russia or like some sensitive countries. You'll be able to see those things as well. Going forward, so we are not only identifying the digital footprint of the organization, as you can see that our scan engines can identify the weaknesses of those assets. And the magic here is collecting tons of data. So that's, when we're saying tons of data, we're talking about almost the text-based internet of all text-based internet that we publicly visible. So in order to do this cyber intelligence, you really need tons of data. I don't know if you ever come across that, but Google actually promoted us in one of their blog and saying that how come a black hat size organization can collect and process such a big data on Google platform. We have been actually promoted in one of their articles. So the amount of data that we are collecting is billions lines of data. When I'm not talking about a few billion, we're talking about like a few 100 billion lines of data is living in our raw databases. So what happens here that our digital footprint that we have collected here is being correlated with the other data points that we have collected, like breach data, like botnet traffic and all those stuff, to generate eventually the cyber rating. So that's the kind of the how these categories score are being collected. So in each one of these categories, you can also see the details. If you want to go like really deep on the vulnerability, the weaknesses that we have discovered for this organization, we provide a whole bunch of details for each one of those categories. That includes the missing patches of that system, the most vulnerable systems, and what kind of services running on that. What are the CVEs that have been discovered on that specific system? It's been all provided in here. And that's not specifically only for patch management. Of course, we can provide you that similar intelligence for all digital present assets and what kind of vulnerabilities exist there. And one thing that you're going to notice that we are providing a lot of details. We're an intelligence company. That's what we do best. But when we are doing that information sharing with you, we're not just simply using a proprietary methodology to do that. Our approach is actually an implementation of cyber threat susceptibility assessment that MITRE already proposed. So those who are familiar with the MITRE's work, there is actually a collective work called System Engineering Guide. If you haven't read this book, definitely it's a Bible for technical engineers. And down here, you will see that the system engineering for mission assurance. So this portion is what we are trying to accomplish to secure the systems. That was my NATO mission as well. So what we do is here as Black Kite is a cyber threat susceptibility assessment. And this assessment, how it can be done is being given here. It's not just you can decide what is good or bad or what should be included in here. It's been written here that the TTPs that you're collecting should be mapping to like KPAC, CWEs, CVEs, and then you are building your threat susceptibility metrics and then coming up with the scoring and all those stuff. Black Kite is an implementation of that. That's why you're going to see that the scoring system is based on the standards, and the mapping to those TTPs are also given here, including common weakness, KPAC, attack, defend, and of course, tons of details are also given here. This might be too much detail for some of the folks on the call, but the reason that I'm emphasizing in here that when you're presenting your report to your vendors, the last thing that you need is, how am I going to defend this report? How am I going to explain that this is an important report? Black Kite is not a proprietary scoring system. Black Kite is an implementation of a standard approach that's been already adapted by not only federal, but also the major industry players. All right, so that is the technical portion, but there are a few questions that usually being asked on the technical side. One, is this company susceptible to ransomware? Second, how about the data breach? So we can answer those questions. So I'm going to use ransomware as an example here, but data breach index is also given at here. So as you know, that ransomware is not a random attack. So it is, the hackers are actually following a pattern. They are not just simply picking up a random company. They're picking up a company. They have exploitable vulnerabilities, credentials on deep dark web, some misconfiguration that they can launch phishing campaigns and so on. So we know their pattern. So we can check the companies, whether they are making the same mistake and making them susceptible. In this case, this company is a little bit more susceptible. Why is that? Here are the indicators that we're seeing a lot down here. And then if I scroll down here, we're going to see that they're using ProFTP vulnerable version, and there is also PHP's end of life version, and so on is being detected on their external facing systems. If I scroll a little bit down, we're going to see some credentials, and down here we will be finding out some poor configuration on some of those digital assets, which is opening door for phishing campaigns, and we can also find out if there's any fragile domains. That actually answers a lot of questions for the insurance companies, because they don't want to write a policy for the company who is susceptible to ransomware, because their goal eventually is not to pay off. Let's be honest, right? So insurance companies want to make sure that you are secure, because you're not going to create the trouble for them. We can help to visualize and illuminate that risk. That is cyber rating. As you can see, there are a lot of data processing going on there. But there is one element that we need to uncover. So I'm going to take you to another point that's not a part of the platform. It's just a visualization. Let's say we were trying to decide our risk of our vendors only by looking at the technical score. This is what we would think, right? So there are 3 vendors. Yellow is the highest risky, and then the blue is the lowest risk, right? So, all right, so that because the technical score, let's say distance from the origin, defining the risk. In this case, technically, this company is the most risky. But as Jason also mentioned, that when you send a document to them and ask for their paperwork, their documents, and you may suddenly see that there are some companies that actually have some compliance challenges. And as you can see in this case, blue is riskier than green, right? Because the distance from the origin in this case is 41 units for green, whereas blue is 54 units away. because we are looking at from two-dimensional view. That actually changes a lot. And same thing, if you were adding your own posture, right? So your own exposure to the equation, you're going to see a picture something like this. Distance from the origin, suddenly green is becoming the biggest risk. Why is that? Maybe this is a company that you are running in your infrastructure or sharing millions of records. Even if their score is high, or even if their compliance is good, still this company is the highest risky company for you, because your exposure is actually defining the risk in this case. So that's why Black Kite is not only giving you a technical report to make it that decision, because it's a parameter, it's not a decision-making tool. We need to combine them into the risk quantification. In order to do that, we need to get their internal documents, right? But that's a little bit problem, because when you want to get the documents from a vendor, of course, they don't want to answer you tons of questions. They don't want to, spend too much time. Even if they want to, you don't want to. So how are we going to solve this problem? Black Kite is a platform can read the external documents automatically, or you can provide documents automatically. Like Templar ServiceNow integration is actually an automation for this. But here's how we can do it manually. If you have documents from the supplier and you don't want to read this document manually, you can simply provide that to the platform, and the platform will be able to read this document. I'm going to choose this as an example one. That's just the PDF document that includes a lot of things that we are doing. And you literally can say, hey, Black Kite is the content, and I need to be aligning with NIST Area 53 or PCI. The platform will be able to extract the content from the file, compare that with each one of those framework requirements, and will tell you what's the equivalent of that. Here's the file that uploaded and the context of the file. And just like that, the platform is capable of, oh, okay, I found this requirement, this context in the file that is addressing this requirement. If you were doing this manually, you would spend days, if not weeks. But the Black Kite platform is literally doing that in seconds, and we will be able to aware of multiple frameworks. Like if your supplier is providing a document that is mostly written in HIPAA language, but you need to understand equivalent of NIST Area 53, it's not a problem. We have a cross mapping, meaning that we will be able to compare the HIPAA results with NIST, so you don't have to be an expert of HIPAA. So you still can focus on the framework that you know best. The Black Kite platform is going to be able to do that operation for you. And here's the cherry on top. This platform supports multiple languages. So if your supplier's document is written in Chinese or Spanish or French, it doesn't matter. You just upload the file and we read that. 130 different languages being supported. That's why one of our reference customer reduced the time to analyze a supplier from 4 to 6 weeks to 4 to 6 hours. That's a 98% time reduction. And the implementation of that is exactly like ServiceNow and Black Kite integration. So in that case, the TPRM solution ServiceNow is going to be holding your third parties, where an integration like Templar Shields integration will be automating the process, and Black Kite is the power unit that's collecting the data and processing that. It's actually streamlining the process significantly. If you use these three together, it's a very much a supercar. So that's how we can get vendors' opinion about their security posture and eventually combine and glue that into this probable financial impact to measure the risk in business terms. So those who are familiar with the Fed ontology is a quantification model, the risk in dollar amounts. Instead of saying to your upper manager that, hey, this company is a C-grade company, and they will not be able to interpret that, but you can say, hey, this company is potentially created as a $15 million risk, but the probability of that to happen is 4.5, annualized risk is $690,000. It's a business problem now. It's not a cyber problem. So you can literally translate the cyber problem to the business problem, and the upper stakeholder like board or the CFO will be able to make a decision about the vendor and what we need to do, either like getting an insurance policy or asking the vendor to improve their security posture. Obviously, we can execute those processes on ServiceNow as well. So last but not least, I'd like to talk about the some of the other capabilities. We can provide this in a large scale. We look at one company. Obviously, we can monitor hundreds of companies, and there are some customers of Black Kite monitoring like 250,000 companies. So that's the kind of a thinking about the scale. This platform can scale like crazy. So if you need that, that's definitely something that we do. And you can set up alerts based on some conditions happen, right? So let's think about it, all right? So dashboard is beautiful and you see a lot of great stuff, but still you don't want to work on weekends, right? You don't want to come and check your vendors during the weekend. So who is going to work on weekend? Workflow engine. So this is an engine will trigger whenever something happens. So let's say I want to be notified when a vendor's ransomware susceptibility index is about a threshold value. You can say, hey, whenever that happens, like the 0.5, shoot me an email. So you set up your rules and let the platform to run that for you. So it's acting like a tier 1 engineer. You're teaching that what's your risk appetite, and it's going to be executing that for you and eventually presenting that data. And of course, remember that when you set up your workflow rules and load up your companies, and the rest of the operation is on ServiceNow. So you can execute your third-party risk management program on ServiceNow, and the template sheet integration will empower this Black Kite capabilities. It's just a one-time setup that you're loading up your vendors and also the workflow engine, and the rest is pretty much the automation. And the trigger points is not limited with ransomware. You can say, hey, if they have data breach, or they have, actually, let's pick up something fancy. Let's say they have been affected by this 3CX recent supply chain attack, or they are violating Section 889, like the prohibited 5 companies. So those kind of things that you can set up rules here to trigger on an event that you will be, you want to be at that. Since ServiceNow here, I will also show you something as well. Let's say there is a critical finding about my organization, right? So I'll choose, in this case, example company is my company. And I can say that, hey, if there's a new finding that is critical, I want to open a ticket on ServiceNow. So you can also manage your company's findings and vulnerabilities on ServiceNow incident response model. So we have the full integration, the bidirectional integration with ServiceNow. So whenever we found the finding, we will be able to open the ticket on ServiceNow. When you close the ticket on ServiceNow, we're going to close the finding on our side as well. So as you can see that you can do, literally, you can do a lot of things. The sky seems to be the limit in this case. But let's go to the visualization of this data and then wrap it up. So in order to visualize the data, we have customizable dashboards. There are 3 of them coming out of the box. You can see a lot of colorful charts here. We are very good at visualizing the things and presenting them. You can see it like geographically, or the risk distributions by grades, average scores, heat maps, and also one of my favorite is ransomware and technical scores. So you know that which one of those suppliers are the most risky from technical or ransomware point of view. If you were asking me that today, there's like 500 companies here, which one of those companies that you will be knocking their door first? These are the red guys that I will be knocking their door, because it seems that they are very susceptible to ransomware. And down here, we can see that the categories, which categories are actually having problem. And this one is a little bit drill down type of tree graph, is being colorful, because you can drill down and see that, oh, which one of those companies creating the biggest, highest financial impact or technical score. So you'll be able to see that in this kind of visualization. Of course, we have also the best worst scores, if you would like to. And lastly, I like to show you the financial impact dashboard, which also a representation of the data, but in this case, from business terms. So what is the overall risk? What's the risk in specific geographical locations, right? Or what is the loss magnitude versus loss event frequency? Or one of my favorite, again, is where's my risk is trending over the time. As you can see, it's not a letter grade, it's the dollar amount. So where, when I have this many vendors, how much of risk that I'm carrying out at this point in time. So that is kind of a way to manage that. When you add more vendors, obviously you want to make sure that your risk is not going through the roof. That's the kind of the way to see that data. So there are so many other capabilities on the platform that we have. The integrations, we have open API. So you can integrate with literally any other solution, just like Templar Shield's wonderful solution. It's actually an implementation of utilization of API. We have also single sign-on integrations. If you have any IDP that supports SAML 2.0, we can integrate with that. So you can also apply role-based access control. You don't have to worry about that, those kind of things. A lot of reporting capabilities as well. So you can do like benchmarking, you can schedule reports, you can use either built-in ticketing system or ServiceNow ticketing system. And upcoming things are like vendor maps. So it's a beautiful model, as I showed in the beginning of the demo. And also a lot of custom dashboards are also possible to build. As you can see that the Templar Shield platform is consuming a very significant powerhouse behind the scene. I will be more than happy to answer any questions if you want me to drill down in any part of the platform. With that, I'd like to turn back to Mitch.
No, thanks. This is a great demonstration, and I've seen it a couple of times now, and just continue to come up with thoughts and questions. So I, one of my questions, and this is somewhat selfish, is, have you been seeing a much bigger interest and uptake in the last couple of years with some of the things you talked about, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, increased cyber attacks? It would seem like there'd be more companies and more risk-averse companies coming your way. Is that what you've been experiencing?
Absolutely right. Especially high-profile events like Russia-Ukraine conflict or Log4j. So whenever those things happen, everybody's trying to figure out how can I get that list fairly quickly, right? Because the time is ticking on that, and you need to get that information. I'll explain the Log4j experience of some of the users. They were trying to send a questionnaire to the suppliers and then getting the response back. Obviously, they want to send this multiple times again because they want to get an updated status. Everybody was, of course, sick of this because nobody wants to answer 1,000 customers' requests, right? So that was actually a big mess for a lot of players. In our platform, Log4j was a tag on the platform. So you were literally seeing that company's status. So, and also when they updated their status, so we were collecting from their like public disclosure sites, wherever that they are putting out there, we are updating that. So when they fix it, you're seeing the Log4j fixed on the platform. So whenever those kind of big events are happening, we see that a lot of interest coming to the solutions like this, because it's reducing the time to operate significantly, right? Like comparing that Black Hat platform is collecting the same data and presenting to hundreds of customers versus you alone trying to get the same information from thousands of vendors is obviously unproportional advantage.
Right. No, kind of to build off of that scenario, what you guys are experiencing, we're hearing from a lot of our customers that their regulators, auditors, all of the people that are watching them, their interest level and their demand goes up as all of these things happen. And all of a sudden they're stuck in a position where it's time. They have this very short window to answer a very big problem to a lot of very important people. And I can see where, solutions like this are going to make that just a lot easier for them. And back to the point Daryl made earlier is, we're definitely seeing that there's all these new risks getting bigger, getting more frequent. The staffing isn't getting bigger typically, and neither is the funding to do this. And so everybody's looking for opportunities to figure that out. And again, there's this painful cycle of the less prepared they are, the more likely they are to be impacted by these kinds of things. I think one of the things that I observe and have been thinking about is kind of how this relates to what ServiceNow is focused on, which is being able to bring these things together in a way that then triggers, the so what do I do about it? Or how do I inform people? And I love the way that, from a, if you will, kind of single pane of glass from a customer using ServiceNow perspective, they're able to get everything from that highest dashboard down to some pretty granular things. And then of course, in the in the spirit of trust but verify, they're able to then drill even further down into it as using the Black Kite platform themselves. So just that ability to go from that high level to prioritize it, size it, and act on it is so important. And then from a ServiceNow perspective, you showed some of the workflow capabilities you have, but as I think about some of the broader scope of what ServiceNow is able to do, the things like when we see these certain things, or we see these certain things happen over some period of time, being able to make sure that in my vendor risk process, I'm asking for those follow-ups or asking for mitigation activities or determining my own mitigation activities, and being able to tie that to, this is my vendor, these are the things I know now with this enhanced level of intelligence, here's the actions that I've been able to take, or the actions I'm asking that partner to take for us. And then again, being able to provide that all in kind of this, everything from the dashboard all the way down to the lowest level, because I'm sure a lot of folks like me, we'd love to believe that the dashboards answer all the questions, but the fact of the matter is the dashboard answers a lot of questions, but for certain things, you need to be able to drill down to that level. So being able to have that in such a flexible way is really important. I think, kind of that leads to a questions like, so for your customers that are using Black Kite today, what have you heard from their executives as far as, how does this impact their, if you will, kind of comfort level, and especially if you've gotten any feedback on, how has this impacted their relationship with their regulators? Because regulators are people too, right? They like to have good people that they're regulating and have that interaction. So what's kind of the executive feedback you've gotten, or the regulator feedback of, what these capabilities are doing for their world?
Yeah, so the feedback that we're getting is definitely the best in the industry. So as you can see in this Gartner's latest report, the Black Kite is the top rated platform. So obviously we're getting a lot of good feedback from our customers and users and the executive team as well. So one of the things that we're solving that for them when they are facing with an auditor, so they're obligated to monitor their supply chain, and preferably multiple times in a year, and in an ideal stage continuously. Obviously doing that, traditional way, it is impossible because you don't have enough manpower. Again, one of the reference customer, they have like 55,000 suppliers. And if they were doing this 55,000 suppliers manual analysis with the group of 17 people, they have an army of people, it would take 35 years to complete the whole cycle. Obviously, that is not applicable, right? It's you're not going to pass any compliance on that. What they have done is they implemented a similar implementation like ServiceNow, TemplateShield, and Black Kite, and they reduced their time in 98%. Like they suddenly became possible that continues to monitor the 55,000 suppliers in a given year. So that actually solved a very important problem for that. Now, when they are facing with the auditor, they're showing that, hey, here's the list of all those companies, and we are processing their documents, not only checking their score, but processing the documents. And they actually brought me to one of their auditors' call and say, hey, is this thing real? So is this really doing what it's saying? And we kind of show that. It's really hard to believe that, right? Because today it's more believable because ChatGPT kind of showed that the machines can understand human language and all those stuff. So, before ChatGPT, people were kind of questioning, how is it possible that machine can read human language? Well, it is possible. That's the large language models do. So auditor actually was very surprised on that, and here's what he said. This is the first time that I'm seeing that this kind of a large supply chain is being monitored by very effective way and very continuous way. So obviously, I didn't get a chance to talk to the executive, but the auditor basically validated that it is a big thing, and it's a features technology. Definitely, it's going to be this way to manage all suppliers. And executives, of course, really happy because they don't have to hire army of people. Instead, they can invest a little bit technology and then make the things the same thing with a very limited manpower.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I expected from this, because I know having spent a large part of my career inside a highly regulated industry, you know, we learned a couple of key lessons. One was you can't find all the needles and all the haystacks everywhere. You have to be able to prioritize that. And so what you guys have demonstrated here is, you know, the ability to prioritize that, and not just from a here's how I feel about it, or here's the feedback that my vendors are giving me, but actually with some like external data points, bringing those together, putting values to them, putting multiple scoring techniques, like you talked about, you know, your implementation of the MITRE techniques to do it. So one, being able to pick what are the right things to go look for. And then secondly, being able to put something tangible around that that's easy for everybody to understand, from the analyst to the executive. And then another big part of it, coming from a regulated environment, regulatory reputation is a real thing. And so the more that you're able to demonstrate, not only do you have processes and tools and repeatable ways to do it, but being able to demonstrate that you're getting those good outcomes, that builds this regulatory reputation where it just streamlines and makes more collaborative that regulatory environment. So all great stuff. I know we've only got a couple minutes left, so I don't want to steal time if there's others that have other questions or comments, but great stuff. Thanks for sharing this with us.
Pleasure.
Yes, thanks, Shandon and Mitch and Jason, of course. Great job, everyone. At this time, we're going to open up the floor to Q&A. So any of the attendees, please feel free to enter your questions and we'll answer them directly. We'll give you about 2 minutes. I see no typing activity in the Q&A, so we'll accelerate the process, save everybody a couple minutes, and wrap it up. Any final statements or comments or questions from any of the panelists?
Great stuff. Thank you for having us here.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Shannon.
And,
as always.
I was just going to comment, special thanks for Templar Shield to kind of being the glue on a number of these things, because it's so important to have this kind of deep analytical capability, and so important to be able to apply it in a kind of enterprise workflow way. And it's things that you guys are helping us do that kind of bring all those things together. So great teamwork.
Great. Thank you for saying that.
And we appreciate the partnership with both ServiceNow and with Black Kite. I'm a fan of the Black Kite tech, and I'm glad that we were able to help streamline the vendor risk process and integrate both platforms. So it was a joy to work on that project.
Okay, and with that, we will wrap up today's webinar. If anyone has any further questions, they can contact jason.dill@templarshield.com, JAS with an E in .dill@templarshield.com. Thank you again, Shandon. As always, pleasure to see you. And the whole process just makes me more of a fanboy maybe than Jason is on the Black Kite. And of course, ServiceNow we're equally fanboyable.
Awesome.
All right. You guys have a great afternoon, and thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.